their constitution that we didn't even master the language for. So this is from in response to our having to be placed on the Blackfeet Reservation and our leaders trying to come to a place of understanding of it. The Blackfeet Nation sleeps in the shadow of the great Rocky Mountains. It is the last encampment of a proud and mighty people who once roamed the prairies of a vast land which was called the Big Sky. Driven here by force, we watched an endless flow of persons come and go, persons sent as servants by the Great White Father in Washington, who came to serve, but only serve themselves. Suffering from their diseases, enduring hunger and starvation, deprived of our precious freedoms, still we survived. But the greatest of all was the loss of our pride and dignity. So like the mighty grizzly bear, who when fall approaches, goes into a winter sleep, we went into our sleep. Now the winter of our suffering is over and we rise. We shall form a new government, a new way of life, recapturing our pride and our dignity and fostering our culture and our heritage. Then the last encampment of a proud and mighty people shall be the homeland for all Blackfeet Indians that shall endure for as long as the sun shall rise and these mountains cast their shadows. And the Blackfeet Nation will live in peace and harmony with our brothers and neighbors forever. This piece has a lot of implications on what we're talking about today. What happened to our traditional knowledge? What happened to our people that implicated things like rivers and mountains and climate? And so we know as people that there's been policy throughout the United States, throughout the annals of the government, that were really a policy of dealing with us as an Indian problem. Remember, the Native Americans, the Indian nations, were originally placed under the Department of War, and we were dealt with like a warring adversary by the US government. To feed into that, we know that the policy of genocide and extermination, which wiped out our populations, by all accounts, 90% of the American Indian population was wiped out from the beginning of Manifest Destiny. And then we went into several periods of reservation, reorganization, and termination. But the basis of movement of this was the acquirement of land. Those things we're talking about today, our tribal nations, our land, our birthplaces, the birthplace, the ending place of the Blackfeet Nation. And so with that came loss, huge losses. And so what has been indicated is that between 1776 and 1887, the US government seized over 1.5 billion acres from our people. And it came through treaty, it came through executive order, it came through the policy of war and genocide, and thereby wiping out our leaders and scaring us into signing and becoming constitutional tribes. None of our constitutions are traditional constitutions. They're little models of the United States government. And so these reservations exist today. But along that line came the policy of allotting land as early as 1798. And treaties with our tribes stated that the land would be divided among their individual members. And so the interesting thing about that is you have a concept of land, of ownership. And this was so foreign to us as Indian nations, because we didn't think of land in that respect. We thought of the land as our mother. So how could we own our mother? And so we would say things just to get them to go away. We would sign things just to get them to go away, because by the time they started entering in treaties with us, many of our tribes were suffering from malnutrition because of the loss of the buffalo, hadn't had access to their fishing grounds, hadn't had access to their spirituality. A lot of our tribes in the South built their spiritual places underground so they could practice and get well without interference or without fear of being jailed. And so these complications and this view of land really was a direct threat to our survival and to our essence of knowing who we were. And so the beginning of land rights and land acquisition really began the demise of, supposedly, to move us from our practices. And then, of course, we have the boarding school and relocation, all those things which dehumanized us and allowed the government to, again, control the land. One of the byproducts of land, and it's very interesting, is that when the Reorganization Act happened, many of our elders were given pieces of land, right? Okay, what does this mean? And in that process, relocation happened. And when relocation happened, a lot of our people were sent to Seattle, to California, to different areas to be educated. Now, our people weren't given education about to be doctors or lawyers. They were given education to be auto mechanics, house cleaners, sewers. So really the manual labor. We weren't allowed access to that other education. And so relocation really started to checkerboard a lot of tribal nations, because when our people were relocated, they were removed from the land by promises of great prosperity and education. However, what happened is they became very culturally disengaged and very lost in the city. And so they would get word home and say, I'm not happy here. I can't make it here. Like many of us here around this room know that when we've left the res for education, it's a culture shock. And oftentimes you say, I can't make it here. I did. And so with that, our grandmothers and our aunties and our grandfathers began to sell their land to get their people back, because they needed pieces of money to get them a train ticket, to get them away home. And so again, the land went back to mainstream society. So I can talk about these things in the context of land, but for as Indian people, because of our emotional connection to the land, because of our thoughts that the land was our mother, it has much more psychological meaning. And so what happened and what continues to happen is that this created historical trauma. Now, historical trauma is documented, and many researchers, Native researchers, have documented the effects of historical trauma. And when we think of loss of land, we also think of loss of culture. We also think of loss of language, because we can't fare them out. We don't parse them out. They're all connected. And so that's why your charge as youth who are engaged in environmental issues, the land and connection to land and how the meaning that it has for us is incredibly important, because the loss of land, the loss of culture, the loss of language has really set us up to have some byproducts of historical trauma. And you hear about them all today: mental health, substance abuse, all those areas that I work in. But that's not because of, when we hear it in mainstream society, the statistic became, all them Indians, they're drunks. All them Indians, they're dumb. All them Indians, this, but there's never a contextual understanding that the contribution of genocide, annihilation, and the dehumanization of our people for the acquisition of land, for gold and settlements and those things, they never see that that contributes to our current proximal trauma, and it creates complex trauma within our people. So it's really important that we understand that the history of our people and our relationship with our land is a love story. It's a love for our mother. And so when we were approached by the Great White Father, we could not understand. We could not comprehend what they wanted. I mean, a lot of tribes laughed. Oh, you want our mother? Go ahead, And so the difficulty is because those issues and that policy happened really rapid. It happened over less than 500 years. It happened so rapid that our people had enormous loss of their land, enormous loss of their people to starvation and to biological warfare, such as measles and smallpox, their loss of language and culture, their way of being, that we became stuck in this traumatic state because everything happened so quickly. We weren't allowed to mourn the loss of our people. When people died, they were threw in mass graves. We had the heavy runner band that was a treaty band and was waving their treaty, and the cavalry still killed the women and the children and the elders because the men were out hunting. And so we became frozen and shocked with PTSD symptoms. And these are historical. And as we move through time, those things that you don't resolve will spill over into the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. So you, as young advocates for land and for water and for air quality, it's important for you to understand when you're advocating, you're also healing people. And so heal yourself in this way, heal your responses in this way, and know that there are going to be times when you search documents or you read documents and it's going to go, and you're going to gasp because you're having a trauma response. So today we mourn 215 kids in Canada. That's psychological trauma. Every time I read, every time I look, every time I see people trying to get well and understand the madness of that, I get traumatized. My grandpa was a product of Canada boarding school. And my grandpa used to speak fluent Blackfeet. I didn't know that as a child growing up. He lived with my family all his life until the end, when our elders go back through their journey and they go back to their childlike state. He's sitting in the corner in his chair and he's speaking fluent Blackfeet. And I look at him, I'm an older woman, I've been in school since then, and he stops mid-sentence and goes, "Oh, I'm not supposed to speak like that." So the connection from trauma to land to culture and language is a very, very strong connection. And like I started this talk, I talked about how the Blackfeet said, "We will rise. This now is our homeland." Even though our homeland was vast, this now is our homeland. Interesting enough is on our homeland in 1964, we had one of the largest floods in the history of Montana. The flood of 1964, which we just honored yesterday, took the lives of 31 Blackfeet and displaced 8,500 more. So think of that in 1964. The issue around that is, yes, we did have torrential rains at that time. And yes, it was very, very scary and alarming and very overwhelming. Torrential rains, right? But torrential rains, people survived torrential rains. What the issue was is we had a dam at the head gates of our waters. And the dam, the American Corps of Engineers knew that this was a faulty dam to begin with. And the dam burst and people died. And so it's critically, critically important that you young folks remember these stories, because you're in the work, you're in the field, and we need to be aware of that. So really quickly, 30% of our elders across the United States, in a study looking at historical loss and trauma, 30% think of the loss of land on a weekly basis. And the other thing we need to think of is, as COVID happened, we know the research shows that nitrogen dioxide levels decreased 60% because the land quieted down. Now, we as Native people know that. We as Native people understand that, to quiet the land down, to take care of Mother, and she'll take care of us. So these are the traditional teachings that are critically important to the science and to the movement and to the programs of which you are invested in today. And with that, I'm going to leave you with this prayer by Bird Rattler, one of our last chiefs. Enter this lodge, O sun, that we may share your strength. Our friends are before us. They have purported great things. They have undertaken difficult tasks. Make plain their trials before them. Bring them health and strength and good fortune. Keep their minds and hearts toward all people, as straight as this pipe stem. Their deeds and thoughts as fragrant as the incense of this sweet grass. Give their eyes the vision of the people, to see the needs of the people. Their ears, the alertness of the deer, cries for help and understanding. And into their hearts, the courage of the bear, to speed to the relief of distress, swift as the flight of the arrow. Make them strong like the bull buffalo, that swerves not from its course, but overcomes all obstacles that stand in its path. As the smoke of our pipe spirals upward, so rise our thoughts in prayer. We invite you, O Sun Spirit, and all friendly spirits, to enter this medicine lodge and smoke with us the medicine pipe. Kamoki, Kamoki, have pity on us, have pity on us. That is my ancestor, Bird Rattler. Remember, what you do today, what you do in the future, is for all our people. And thank you for letting me be a small part of your journey.
Goodness, Chief. Thank you, Dr. Kipp. Thank you for your wise words and for the wisdom that you share with us, as well as that inspiring message of history and of future. We're going to now move into Owen Oliver's youth response and keynote here.